For those of you who are not aware, the mark of the new year 2024 came with something that left a lot of us curious as to what would be to come following this interesting change. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the incredibly popular animated character Mickey Mouse entering the public domain. This basically means his likeness is free to use and throw around however anyone wants, since Disney technically no longer holds the rights to that character. Well, the leading theory as to what was to come was to pretty much expect what came with Winnie the Pooh entering the public domain. We immediately got a low-budget horror nonsense film called Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. Needless to say, within the first 24 hours of Mickey Mouse entering the public domain, we got, I believe, a Mickey Mouse trap horror film that looks to be announced, and I believe a Steamboat Willie horror game got announced too. So it seems people literally had projects up their sleeves ready to be announced for whenever this domain got into public hands. However, it seems another usage of this IP has been discovered, considering on the first day of 2024, a video titled The Vanishing of SS Willie was released and immediately sent my way by my friend Sebastian here. Now, I'm not too sure what to entirely expect out of this one-off horror story. All I know is there has to be some ties to Mickey Mouse, and we are probably going to get dark and frightening. This obviously isn't the first time Mickey Mouse's likeness has been used in a horror genre. In early internet days, Suicide Mouse was one of the most popular creepypastas to spread about the scene. The story is basically about an old hidden Mickey Mouse animation stored somewhere in Disney's vault. The animation was thought to just be a 3 to 5 minute weird cartoon of Mickey just wandering around until someone in the company discovered an extended cut that was more around 9 minutes. Supposedly, after someone had watched and finished the whole tape, they ran out to the nearest guard saying real suffering is not known before grabbing the gun and, let's just say, really getting to know the bullet. It certainly still remains a very disturbing creepypasta that a lot of people point to when talking about the ones that scared them the most. For me, what makes it so frightening is that Mickey Mouse is this kid's character that you never associate something this graphic and dark with it, so it's almost a fresh taste of horror, since this is probably the first time someone is seeing this beloved character get used in such a horrific fashion. However, we are not here to talk about Mickey Mouse in his creepypasta days. We're here to uncover this new rendition of the SS Willie tale, with whatever horrific twist may lie. Granted, this video is labeled as a horror short film, but I believe the style it is told in can also earn it the label of being an analog horror piece. By all means, before we get into it, be sure to go check out the original video, and then make your way over here for us to talk about it. But before I let you get too far, I just wanted to say that if you enjoy what you're watching and want to help support the channel, go on and hit all those neat buttons down below, including the subscribe and bell notification so that you can be a part of every new upload. I will have the social links in the description below for the Instagram and Letterboxd, so be sure to check those out too. Alright, now you can pass through. In 1928, a documentary was produced that followed the disappearance of the commercial steamship the SS Willie. Unfortunately, an unexpected fire broke out at the studio, destroying every known copy of the film, never to be seen, until now. According to the documentary, the SS Willie made its last voyage in 1909, where the crew never made it back to port, and the ship was never found. According to the creator of this documentary, their intentions on making this film is to uncover the mystery behind the disappearance, and find a way to ease those affected by the tragedy, and to ease the minds of those with the utmost curiosity on the situation. He even said that he has compiled newfound evidence, an interview, and even an expedition to show off in his film to help solve the mystery, or supposedly solve it altogether. Part 1. The Crew. We are introduced to photos of the captain, the first mate, the 2 deckhands, alongside the chambermaid and the cabin boy. I gotta be honest, there is something eerily off-putting of these old vintage photos. The hyper-realistic animal-human hybrids are actually stunning to look at, but also give me the creeps looking into their soulless eyes. According to records, this was the official crew of the ship at the time of its final trip. The narrator of the documentary tells us that the names will be kept hidden out of respect, but it is very important that we remember their faces. Don't worry, I won't be forgetting these faces for a long, long time. Part 2. The Witness. We are brought back to that interview the creator had told us he had got earlier. Apparently, they had found someone who just so happened to come into contact with the crew, helping load cargo just before the ship's end. Similar to the photo identities, the identity of the person being interviewed remains anonymous, but that doesn't stop us from very easily catching distinct and inhuman features. They make me think of a Muppet, so I'm going to headcanon that this is one of the Muppets being interviewed for this mystery. They report that the only crew member they actually ever saw was the cabin boy, a young mouse whose name is redacted. I'm sure we can figure that one out. Apparently, the young mouse spoke about how this was going to be his last voyage as he was love-struck. Seemingly, this would be his final trip because he had a lady mouse he had to settle down with. According to the Muppet, he would frequently mention the fact that he and his redacted Lady Mouse were going to make music together. The Muppet then goes on to say, however, that something seemed very wrong. There was this look in his eyes that told me he was up to something. To this day, I remember those eyes. We then cut to a picture of our little cabin boy, who stares deeply into the lens with his black, empty eyes. What's he thinking in there? Before we get into this next part, I just wanted to say that the art direction and style of this horror short has been absolute perfection. The attention to detail and just the staple in time it's presenting feels truly authentic. Analog horror can sometimes accidentally slip in some areas where the period piece gets a little fractured, but here everything feels incredibly polished and has maintained my immersion throughout the entirety of the story so far. Part 3. The Log. We are told that soon we will be presented with some water-damaged documents that the creator had discovered by the shorelines. It's said that the context of the documents will be presented as found so that we, the audience, can come to our own conclusion. Everything seems normal on the report for November 18th, just regular cargo loading. But it's the next night that starts to get a little interesting. I was awakened by the sound of strange music in the middle of the night. The next morning, one of the deckhands has gone missing. I suspect one of the crew may be playing a practical joke. If I am being completely honest, my first assumption was that the music had to do with potential sirens being in the water, and the idea of that was frightening enough. But then I remember our young mouse talking about how he and his lady mouse were going to make music together. November 20th. Music was playing again last night, but I swear it sounded like screaming. Our other deckhand has gone missing. The remaining crew is starting to become very frightened. I have assured the crew that the culprit will be found by the end of our journey. I will be arming myself tonight. It sounds like instead of a mass disappearance, the crew individually was vanishing off the boat. I can only imagine the amount of chaos this would erupt at sea, as it seems they have a murder mystery on their hands. I have a sneaking suspicion we already know who the culprit is. November 21st. Something hideous is afoot. Last night, there was no music, but foul smells started to infest the halls. Both the cabin boy and chambermaid have gone missing. The first mate is panicking, and I have no choice but to seek the nearest port today. The next report we see is just big words written in the middle that just say, "I found the music." Based on all these documents, it's safe to say that the cabin boy certainly had something to do with all the missing crew, and it also seems that the chambermaid is an accomplice to the whole thing. I can only imagine what the term making music could be code for, but it certainly can't mean anything good. Part 4. The Expedition. According to the creator, they believe they have finally compiled enough information to finally embark on their journey to find the missing vessel. Using all of their evidence and documents, they were able to approximate a location as to where they believe the SS Willie might be located. We are shown an image of a map with an X crossed out there over to the right. Looks like the ship met its end right dead center of the water. It appears that after a day of traveling, they had reached the approximate location of the ship. Our narrator sends his crewmen down with cameras to capture any photos of anything they find down there. We then are presented with some old footage, which looks to be one of the cameramen going down under the water to capture footage. After that, we are told that we are going to be soon presented the photos that they had gotten on their expedition. He even leaves us a final warning that these photos are not for the faint-hearted. The first photo we get is a bit of a far-off shot, but you can see the ship there in the background. I gotta say, deep, empty oceans aren't the biggest fear of mine, but it's certainly up there, so just these deep-sea photos alone are enough to tense me up a little bit. The second photo is a close-up of the SS Willie's name painted onto the boat. Our third photo looks just to be the side area of the ship, whereas the fourth photo is just a picture of this window on the side. It looks eerily similar to the eyes of the cabin boy, however, but perhaps that is just mere coincidence. The next set of photos is when things start to get truly unveiled. We are met with a photo of the captain, clearly dead and completely decayed to purely bones. The next photo looks to be of one of the deckhands, with his teeth shaped to look like piano keys. Is this how the music was being played throughout the night? It looks like our second deckhand might have got it the worst. The rib cage had been completely stretched out to resemble strings. The last image we are presented with is of a record laying flat on the surface with what looks like another bone being used for it in some way. The creator of the documentary makes mention of the fact that every member of the crew seemed to have been brutally mutilated in some strange way. It's also reported, however, that the bodies of the cabin boy and the chambermaid were never found. I imagine the most likely outcome is that after they had their torture fun, they sank the ship in the middle of the sea where no one would find it and ran off into the sunset. Perhaps they are the very same Mickey and Minnie that we see go on and live their Disney lives. Evil bastards. It is also reported that from all the wreckage, a record labeled Our Music was found. I imagine it's the same one we saw in the last photo. The recording gets played, as it said it may be the final clue as to what happened to the vessel, but I think we get a bit more than we bargained for. The record begins as normal, with your regular old Disney tunes, except there is a little something off-putting about it. Very soon it becomes clearly off-putting, as we can hear the screaming mentioned in the reports heard in the back. Sounds like our cabin boy and chambermaid would take a crew member and horrifically transform and mutilate it into an instrument of their liking, to then which they would play said instrument whilst the crew member was alive and in agonizing torture throughout the process. The screaming continues on for a bit longer until the documentary film cuts out, and the short film comes to an end. After watching this horror short, I was very curious to see how the original Steamboat Willie animated short plays out. I know I had to have seen it at some point in time, but I couldn't tell you anything that happens after Mickey's whistling intro. The animated short starts off like your standard Mickey Mouse short. He gets into some antics. The guy, who I think is just an older version of Stinky Pete, is the captain, and constantly gets pissed off with Mickey. You know the deal. After grabbing a cow and then upskirting Mickey, we are then presented with something that made my eyes widen, and that horror short just took on a whole new meaning. Granted, this goat did eat Minnie's previous instrument, but the punishment enacted on this goat is eternal pain and suffering, as his tail gets snapped and rolled around so that he can blare music out of his held open mouth. These evil bastards are overly punishing this poor goat for just being hungry. Their crimes don't just stop here. He runs over and plays some regular instruments for once, until a cat walks into his line of sight. That cat is safe no longer, as Mickey ferociously grabs the cat by his tail, digs his heel into his back to get screams of music for their enjoyment. The baby pigs get their tails almost ripped off. He strangles a goose with his bare hands. All the while, Minnie sinisterly sits with the eater of her property, who she still has contained in her tail trap, continually spinning and spinning, breaking every bone in his poor tail. Will this goat's pain see no end? Our poor cow is the last to get the torture treatment. The mouth is thrown open as Mickey starts banging his wand on all of their teeth. Does the music sound good enough yet, Mickey? Have these animals suffered enough? I gotta say, The Vanishing of SS Willie is definitely one of my favorite analog horror pieces I have found on YouTube, and maybe even one of my favorite horror shorts in general I have seen, because this truly felt like this story was as full as can be. And I can sense the creator had plenty of time to refine and polish the short so that come time for 2024, they were ready to send it off on the 1st of January, which is also just super cool. The style of the short and how well it was able to immerse me in the time period really makes this stand out as a top-tier horror for me. It's also very subtle. There was no loud noises or any truly disturbing visuals. A lot of what is disturbing is in the implications, and really the only true terrifying moment is when you finally get to hear the music that the cabin boy and the chambermaid created together, using the tormented bodies of their crewmates. It's a geniusly crafted dark twist on this light-hearted animated short made almost 100 years ago, I'm sure. If you haven't already, I highly recommend checking out this channel, as it seems they have very exciting future projects in the work that after this, you know I am pumped for. Granted, even though I heard Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey was not good in the slightest, I am still a little intrigued to see if these other usages of the Mickey Mouse IP in the horror sense will manage to at least do something interesting with it. But I don't think the odds are in that movie's favor. I will say I am a bit more excited to see the horror games that come out of this, as I just saw the trailer for Infestation Origins, which seems like it has some potential, but who knows. It's hard to differ just yet whether these properties are solely just taking advantage of the popular IP, or if they have something truly different to offer the role. That is really how I feel about this horror short with Steamboat Willie, as it is so masterfully and carefully reworked the story to fit this dark and twisted version. Also, taking the style and making it that hyper-real format added a whole lot to making the world feel as unsettling as possible. I really think this video will be sticking with me for a long time, and I just love it. But that's probably about it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, be sure to leave a like and a comment, and be sure to subscribe and hit that bell notification so you can be a part of every new upload. But other than that, I thank you all, as we are so close to hitting that 100K mark I can almost smell it. But I'll catch you all in the next video.